United Nations councils like UNESCO and UNICEF. There were over 2,800 women at this Moscow conference that was held June 23rd to the 27th. We in the Canadian delegation numbered 103, and there were 150 Americans. The host group at the Congress was the Soviet Women's Committee. Right at the very beginning on the trip across on the plane, I had my first contact with a Soviet woman, a young biology teacher from the Ukraine, who was part of the Soviet Ukrainian Republic Peace Committee, which had been visiting Canada for the previous 8 days. She was about 27 years old, and she was just extremely interested in Canada and asked me innumerable questions about all sorts of things, like our university entrance requirements, about our school system. She was, although she must have been extremely tired from her trip all across Quebec and Ontario and right to Winnipeg, she was nevertheless still interested enough to ask numerous questions about Canada. So people are very, very interested in Canada and North America and what's happening here. As I mentioned, the host organization was the Soviet Women's Committee, so when we were taken for tours and when we asked for opportunities to do certain things like go to church or whatever, these requests were responded to not by tour guides but by members of the Soviet Women's Committee who can speak. I was surprised how many people can speak English, how many of them could speak English or French or Spanish or some of the different European languages. The first person that I was associated with from the Soviet Women's Committee is this person whom you see up here, whose name is Emilia, and she took us in the first 3 days before the Congress began on several tours, she took us also on an informal tour to the Arbat Mall, which is just like our malls that we may see in many Canadian cities, where you have the street closed to traffic and you see people doing portraits, sketches, and there are little shops along the way that you can go in and buy things. It was very pleasant and very enjoyable. There were just a group, about 5 or 6 of us who went with Emilia on this tour. And she also took us on our first trip in the Moscow subway, in which I can assure you that the escalators go faster than the Toronto or the Montreal subways. They go down, it seems that we're going down about half a mile. The subway stations are beautifully decorated though, and it's very clean, of course. The whole city is very clean, by the way, and I was impressed by the number of trees and green strips and parks in Moscow. It really is a very attractive city. But the first contact I ever had with a Soviet citizen was with Nelia Matroshalova, who came last year as a representative of the Soviet Women's Committee to a meeting of the Canadian Federation of University Women in Montreal. We did meet with Nelia when we were in Moscow. We had dinner with her and talked about her life and what's happening to her, and shared some of our experiences. Unfortunately, she's had some ill health, and so we didn't see an awful lot of her. Then, if you could switch it to the next one, our next opportunity was to visit a daycare center in Moscow, where 200 children are looked after in this particular daycare center who have vision problems, or potential vision problems. If you can see some of them, we'll just see perhaps in the next slide. You can see that some of the children have one of their eyes covered. I think maybe they have lazy eye syndrome or whatever it is, but they all had some sort of vision problems. They were ages 1.5 to 6 years old. And we had a tour of the daycare center in which we saw the kind of stimulating educational environment that they have, lots of educational toys. We saw Lego sets and things like that, building blocks, dolls dressed in the various national costumes of the Soviet Union to teach them about the various nationalities. There are over 120 different nationalities in the Soviet Union. The next one, please. This is one of the rooms in which the children take their naps. There were several of these rooms like this with these little beds where they could lie down. And at the end of our tour, we were just delighted that a group of 4-, 5-, and 6-year-olds performed for us. And they sang some of their national songs and did some of the national dances, and then they did pop dances, and they got us up there doing these pop dances with the children. And it was just delightful, and they were so unself-conscious about it, and then they played some games with us, some guessing games that we had to guess which particular instrument they were playing behind a screen and so on. And it was really delightful, and I had rather an emotional moment when I suddenly remembered that it's these lovely children that our Western nuclear weapons are targeted. The opening ceremonies of the World Congress of Women were held at the Palace of Congress, which is a huge building. It was built about 25 years ago. It's right in the Kremlin. The Kremlin is the old, ancient walled city of Moscow, and it's where the legislative buildings are. And this particular Palace of Congress is where the party congresses are held, and there's beautiful marble staircases, and the interior is beautifully decorated. I talked, while we were waiting for people to assemble, I talked with some Soviet women around me, and I was surprised again how many Soviet women can speak English or French. And it appears that Soviet young people learn either French or English or German in the high schools, and so that's apparently why so many of them can speak foreign languages. Since I'm originally from Quebec, I was able to speak French with some of them, and we talked while we were waiting for the Congress to begin. And here's the looking back in the hall, which held several thousand people, I guess, the women assembling from all over the world in their various beautifully costumed national costumes. Many of them are Native American. There were about 15 Native Americans from Canada who were in the delegation, and they dressed in their native costumes. And some of the Europeans did also, and some of the African people, as I'll show you in a minute. During the opening ceremonies, Mr. Gorbachev, Mikhail Gorbachev, the General Secretary of the Soviet Union, spoke to us. And after he had finished speaking, children came into the hall, as you can see, bearing a banner, a long banner decorated with doves. And there was quite an emotional appeal by the children for peace in the world. And I found one thing in the Soviet Union, that when something is emotional and you feel moved, you don't feel ashamed to weep. And we did a lot of weeping when we were in the Soviet Union. And we didn't feel the slightest bit ashamed of it either. Children came in, as I say, dressed in national costumes, some of the Soviet children too, and they're presenting flowers to the people on the dais who are the leaders of the various national delegations. At the end of this very emotional appeal for peace, everyone was weeping, including Mr. Gorbachev, who had to get out his handkerchief and wipe his eyes and blow his nose. We were very impressed with the humanity of Mr. Gorbachev. Now, here is a picture of some of the Norwegian women who were dressed in their Norwegian national costume, standing outside the Palace of Congress after the ceremonies were over. Next one. And here's some of the African women from Zimbabwe and Zambia and many different African countries were representative. And I wanted to get a picture of some of these people because I thought they were beautiful in their colorful gowns and headdresses. They do such beautiful things with fabric for their headpieces. And I was trying to get an opportunity to take their picture, and I had an interesting experience. A Soviet woman helped me get that picture. She got these women to stand and pose, and then she gestured me over to stand beside them, and I looked very uncolorful beside these beautiful African women with their lovely costumes. And in the next slide, the woman on the left, Titania, is the one who helped me, and Titania could speak no English, and I can speak no Russian, except for maybe half a dozen words, And yet we became such very good friends. We had an opportunity briefly to talk through the woman on the right, who was a Soviet woman who could speak both English and Russian, and I found out that she was the manager of a leather goods factory, and she was a member of the Soviet Women's Committee who was attending these opening ceremonies. And we talked about our children, we asked, how big they were and how many, and we used sign language, and we got along just beautifully. She wanted me to send her pick copies of the photographs. She regretted that she hadn't brought her camera. And so a few weeks ago, I had copies of these slides made for her and wrote her a letter and told her something about the part of the country where I live in, which is southern Alberta, and asked her if she would write to me because I'd like to hear from her too. And I wrote in English, and I assume she'll have to find someone who can translate, as I'll have to find someone to translate when she writes back to me. I wanted to tell you a bit about one of the very interesting programs that I attended during the Congress that has nothing to do with this slide that's up here right now, unfortunately. Women for America for the World was an Academy Award-winning film that maybe some of you have seen. It was directed by Vivian Di Roo, an American or British-American woman, and it won the award for the best short documentary in this year's Academy Award series. And she introduced this film and showed it to us. It has a lot to do with peace and especially with development and the lack of it in various parts of the world. It was a very moving program because we had a dialogue afterwards in which Soviet women and American women, Canadians, and some African women participated. And one of the Soviet women, whose name was Zoya, got up and told us about some of her experiences during the Second World War. As you may know, the Soviet Union lost 20 million people during the Second World War alone, just in that particular war. And she said that she had lost 8 members of her family and that her husband left for the war when her first child was just 3 weeks old, and she never saw him again. And this was the experience of many, many Soviet women. Of course, they lost their families, lost their husbands. And she said that at one point during the war, some German prisoners were being marched through the city. And these prisoners were terrified of what the Soviet people would do to them because, of course, of what the Soviet people had experienced during the war. And she said that at first they felt great hostility toward these prisoners, but then she said they couldn't do anything to them because they saw cold, hungry, tired men. They saw people, and they couldn't harm them in any way. And she said, we have to get rid of the concept of the enemy. And I think that's so important because we in North America have been conditioned to think of the Soviet people as our enemy, and I don't believe they are. And perhaps they've been probably conditioned to think of us as their enemy. But there's a new movement now among people in this continent and in their country too, to get rid of that concept of the enemy. And I think it's so important. And with regard to that, I want to also mention during that program an 87-year-old American woman who spoke. She was angry, 87 years old, and she was on this trip too. It was really inspiring. She was so passionate in her anger at the arms race and the corporations who benefit from continuing the arms race. This is what's going on. It's certain corporations that are benefiting from keeping that arms race going. With regard to the enemy concept too, I'd like to mention another American woman whom I sat beside during this program who told me something very encouraging. She said that next September a meeting is planned in Moscow where they're planning to, or the Center for Soviet-American Dialogue in Seattle is planning to bring American TV producers and journalists and filmmakers to Moscow to talk with their Soviet counterparts. And perhaps we'll get away from some of these terribly anti-Soviet films like America, which is, some of you probably have seen. In fact, the Soviet people saw that film on television. It was shown in Moscow. And we asked some of them, what did you think of it? And at first they said, well, at first we were amused. We thought it was really funny. But then later, as they saw more of it, they were very disturbed about the image of Soviet people that is projected by this particular film. Moscow Day was a very interesting experience for us, where we were taken to the cultural center of an automobile plant where 3,200 people work, and we were greeted by women dressed in beautiful national costumes, bearing bread and salt, which, as some of you probably heard last evening when we were at the Duke of War banquet, is the traditional Soviet or Russian greeting, bread and salt. Then we were taken inside and entertained, and they sang and danced for us and got us involved in singing and dancing, and we were singing, trying to sing some of the Russian songs as well. And then we were taken in small groups of about 8 to the apartments of Soviet citizens. And I went to the apartment of Polina and Sasha. Polina was a dental surgeon in a clinic nearby, and her husband Sasha was a heating plant. Standing beside a young man who could speak English.
What goes on, as we've said to each other. There is, however, a sense in which we have, I think, begun to develop some ways in which individually we can act and help those who are maimed and tortured to unbend, as they will, of course, help us out of their vulnerability and woundedness. And so some will figuratively begin to dance. One of the ways I think that we can really assist in this is to share our reality and our analysis of the issues in Canada that affect us with international visitors. And some of these are slides of windows that have been made and shared with the international community. Very often when people come, all we show them is the great things, the beauty of the waterfalls and so on. These are some of the windows that have been shared across the world as people travel. I mean, this could be BC, right? Bonne chance, as they say en français. Good luck. You like that one? A reflection of our society. What we like to do in Canada. I think this one went to Mozambique. This is an Anglican priest from Winnipeg, the woman, presenting one to the Mothers of May Square, the mothers of the disappeared in Buenos Aires, in an action of solidarity. That's me presenting one on prisoners of conscience to the Vicaria of Solidarity in Santiago, Chile. At the moment that was being presented, there was Pinochet was having a big rally, a 7-hour parade it took to pass the reviewing stand. And there was the suspicion that he would in fact encourage the mob to storm the Vicaria. And it doesn't show it here, but in another room, a man with binoculars was watching out the window the whole time. I was very glad to leave Chile. Well, it seems to me that that we should be giving each other signs of hope In the very darkest days, you remember, Jeremiah did a very, what on the surface appeared to be a crazy thing. He bought himself a plot of land after all his people had been carried off into captivity. And I don't think it was for escalating real estate. It was a way in which he expressed his confidence and his hope in the future. And I think that we need to be sharing with each other symbolically plots of land. We began to do this weekend, and we've done it before. We'll do it in the future. So thank you for the weekend, and keep sharing the plots of land.
Here and say, I agree wholeheartedly, amen, and bow out, except there's something I just have to say. I learned something this weekend. That is that I'd look pretty good in a purple mitre. I've never worn a purple mitre. But wow, talk about a new style. I'm going to have to start something. I'm by calling a theologian. Trained that way, never had a chance to exercise my task professionally because I was tied up in many other things. But my professional theological deformation gives me a sensitive ear to certain words. So I listened tonight theologically, and I was amazed how often I heard the words faith, hope, and charity. Not always using exactly that word, although we were asked for an H, an O, a P, and an E. But that reality came out so beautifully. For instance, the experience in Russia. How often what the women did and said and heard there spelled the words love, charity. We have to start loving one another. The faith that you have expressed so frequently in the course of this weekend. Faith in each other. And the indications that you have reason to have faith in one another. I was very sorry that Ted Scott couldn't be here because Ted is a very dear friend from many years ago. And I always look for opportunities to visit with Ted. When he stops in Victoria to see his mother, or I go through Toronto, we try to get together. It's not always possible. But on the other hand, I said to myself, if Ted had been here and Terry Pageant had been here, plus Lois and myself, and we'd all been up there on the stage, I'm wondering if that wouldn't have been so much that maybe a lot of the talent that came out here might not have emerged. And I just want you to know that I was very sensitive to that. I was kind of happy that maybe there weren't too many outside people on stage all the time because I was amazed at the kind of talent that you revealed and the number of people who came forward. And I'm sure a lot of you could have contributed a lot more. So I just want to close with those three words. It's Paul who told us, faith, hope, and love remain. I want you to continue to have faith in each other. And I want you to continue to do the things that you are doing here because they give us hope. And especially continue to set that beautiful example of loving one another. Thank you for having us here.
Just before you go, Bishop Di Roo, as I was sitting over there, truly, there dropped into my lap this. With the message that it was for you.
So now I can start a new style. How's that? A little taller than the ones I usually wear, but that'll be a delightful souvenir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bishop Di Roo. I'm sure that there is a feeling of gratitude and praise, a hallelujah, a shalom, a sense of the deep joy and love and peace of being part of this Christian fellowship and community. And we are so thankful. And I wonder if I could begin by just giving you a chance to say a vocal thank you to Bishop Remi and Lois Wilson and Murray Thompson for their wonderful creative leadership this weekend. Thank you so much.
This has been paradise here in Kootenay area, and we are not going to allow to go cold-blooded like this. Why don't we make a circle of hugging, a hugging circle? And I will lead you, and I hope you all will follow in the Negro spiritual.
We will lead, you can lead us, and we will follow, but I think that should be just our departure. So may we have just 2 minutes first and then come and lead us and have our departure?